For the time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The words were brief, but their meaning struck the monarchy like a hammer against glass. Prince William did not plead for patience. He did not speak of reconciliation or another private attempt to heal the family. Instead, standing before a carefully selected group inside Windsor Castle, the future king delivered a statement that appeared to end years of uncertainty. Harry will never return where he left, and in that instant, the past became unreachable. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William entered Windsor Castle's white drawing room, moments after a tense meeting with Charles and senior household advisors. The room, used for formal royal gatherings and private discussions, carried the weight of decisions that rarely reached the public unchanged. He paused, beside an empty chair once occupied by Harry during family briefings. Then the prince stepped forward and made the central decision unmistakable. William formally declared that his younger brother would not return as a working royal, would not reclaim his former position within the royal household, and would not resume the place he had voluntarily left beside the direct line of succession. That line refers to the closest family members expected to inherit the crown. The statement did more than close an office. It severed the possibility that time alone could restore Harry's former life. William's voice remained steady, but his hand tightened around the edge of the lectern when he spoke his brother's name. The future king had spent years balancing anger with memory, yet the restraint in that moment revealed how deeply the decision wounded him. This was not merely an administrative ruling. It was one brother admitting that love had not been enough to rebuild trust. Charles listened from an adjoining room through an open doorway. When the decisive sentence was spoken, the king lowered his eyes and slowly removed his glasses. He had spent years keeping the possibility of Harry's return alive, hoping patience might repair what confrontation could not. Now his elder son had ended that hope in public language too clear to reverse. William had not improvised the statement. A sealed draft reviewed that morning originally included a sentence, leaving open the possibility of an eventual return. The prince personally removed it before entering the room. A senior courtier then noticed a second page beneath the announcement. It contained conditions Harry had apparently refused, but before anyone could read them, William folded the paper and placed it inside his jacket. The palace understood the declaration. It did not yet understand the hidden cause. But to understand why William spoke with such painful certainty, the story must move beyond the statement itself, and into the fractured lives of the two brothers standing on opposite sides of it. Saved for all upcoming sections. Long before titles, interviews, accusations, and palace ultimatums, William and Harry were simply two brothers walking behind the same coffin, carrying a grief neither child knew how to explain. That shared wound once made them inseparable. Now it had become the silent territory between them. William believed duty demanded sacrifice. Harry believed survival demanded escape. Both men thought the other had betrayed the promise they made when they were young. William now carried more than personal anger. As heir, he was responsible for protecting the monarchy's future, Catherine's position, and the stability surrounding their children. The heir is the person expected to inherit the crown, and every private decision he made could shape the institution that would eventually pass to him. He could no longer treat Harry's actions as the pain of a younger brother alone. Each public attack, demand, and refusal now reached his wife, his family, and the authority he was preparing to hold. Harry had built a life away from Britain, yet distance had never fully released him from the palace. He rejected royal control while continuing to define himself through the family he had left. His demand for independence repeatedly collided with his need to remain emotionally and symbolically connected. He wanted freedom from the institution, but not complete separation from its meaning. William sat alone in his Windsor office studying an old photograph of himself and Harry in military uniforms. For several seconds, the prince allowed the memory to remain. Then an aide entered, and he turned the frame face down. The gesture exposed what his statement concealed. Affection survived, but he had chosen control over hope. Harry received an advance copy at home. He read the decisive sentence twice, pushed back his chair, and walked away without speaking. The Duke could not decide whether the words made him furious, rejected, or strangely free. Silence gave him no answer. Catherine had helped William reach the distinction he had resisted for years. In a private conversation, she told him he could still love Harry as a brother, while refusing to restore him as a working royal. That separation hardened the future king's resolve, because it allowed love to survive without surrendering authority. Charles had imagined another path. The king had prepared a limited family reunion at Balmoral, the monarch's private Scottish estate, hoping distance from London might soften old wounds. William's declaration destroyed that plan before the invitation could be delivered. The final decision, however, had not grown from history alone. A recent private incident had changed everything, and the prince had begun calling it the final breach. And behind the public statement lay one hidden encounter, a moment inside a royal memorial service when brotherhood, duty, and trust finally collided beyond repair. Every royal rupture has a moment that later becomes impossible to forget. For William, it happened not during a televised interview or an angry public exchange, but inside a quiet chapel after the guests had departed. Harry had returned expecting a private conversation with his father. Instead, he encountered his brother beside a memorial wreath, and within minutes, one demand transformed years of tension into a point of no return. Harry had been invited to a private memorial ceremony at St. George's Chapel under strict conditions. The chapel is the royal church inside Windsor Castle, used for family services, weddings, and burials. He agreed there would be no personal photographers, no public statement, and no discussion of future duties during the service. Charles hoped shared remembrance might create a narrow path toward family contact without restoring his younger son's official position. William attended reluctantly, fearing the meeting would become another negotiation. The fear proved justified. After the ceremony, Harry approached his brother alone and demanded a written guarantee that he and Meghan would receive formal roles at future state occasions before he agreed to another meeting with Charles. State occasions are major national ceremonies attended by senior members of the monarchy. The demand struck William with brutal force because it turned access to their father into leverage. William stared at him and asked whether the memorial had meant anything beyond negotiation. Harry replied that he was protecting his family from being used for appearances without respect, recognition, or proper security. The Duke believed the palace wanted his presence when it served the crown, while refusing the status he felt his wife and children deserved. Their voices stayed low, but restraint only sharpened the anger. William moved a chapel chair aside and told Harry that every private family moment had become conditional. The prince accused him of attaching demands to grief, illness, and reconciliation. Harry answered that his brother was using the crown to control access to Charles and punishing him for leaving. A folded proposal inside the younger royal's coat revealed how far the conditions reached. It listed security arrangements, ceremonial seating, guaranteed invitations, and public acknowledgement of his children. William later obtained a documented summary of those terms and saw proof that any return would immediately become institutional rather than personal. Charles entered moments after the exchange and found his sons standing apart. The king asked what had happened, but neither man answered. He mistook their silence for self-control. William had already reached a darker conclusion. The arrangement could not continue. 3 days later, the future king summoned Harry to one final private meeting. No wives, no advisors, no lawyers, no courtiers. That last meeting would not repair the brothers. It would force them to say aloud what years of controlled statements had carefully concealed. There were no cameras in the room, no advisors waiting to soften the language, and no prepared statements to hide behind. William entered first. Harry arrived several minutes later and closed the door himself. For the first time in years, the two brothers faced each other without the palace, the press, or their families standing between them. What followed was not a negotiation. It was an emotional reckoning neither man could escape. William had requested the meeting after the memorial dispute, Convinced that the argument could no longer be treated as another temporary breakdown, the private sitting room at Windsor offered no audience and no shield. The prince believed his brother now had to choose between a genuine family relationship and a continuing effort to regain royal influence. Harry arrived expecting another discussion about security, ceremonial access, and future appearances. He was not prepared for what waited instead. William placed the prepared list of conditions face down on the table. He told Harry that the conversation would not be about privileges, it would be about trust. The future king then asked whether any private exchange between them could remain private, or whether every conversation would eventually become part of another public argument. Harry answered that silence had always protected the institution while leaving him defenseless. In that moment, the difference between them became impossible to hide. One saw privacy as loyalty, the other saw it as control. Harry accused William of replacing brotherhood with hierarchy. The Duke used the word to describe the fixed order of authority inside the monarchy, where the heir carries greater responsibility than younger members of the family. William replied that the structure had existed before either of them, and would remain after them. He could no longer risk Catherine, their children, or the crown to rescue a relationship his brother repeatedly carried into public conflict. Harry rose so suddenly that the leg of his chair struck the floor. William did not move. A long silence followed, before the younger brother asked, "Are you telling me there is no way back?" The heir answered, "Not to the place you abandoned." William still offered one narrow path. Harry could return privately as a son and brother, but never as a working royal or the center of a parallel court. The younger man rejected the distinction. Private reconciliation without public restoration, he argued, would make him appear defeated and powerless. Harry warned that closing the door would have consequences. William replied that keeping it open had already caused consequences for everyone else. After his brother left, the prince wrote a note to Charles, requesting authority to make the decision permanent. The confrontation ended with a door closing, but the real decision now rested with a father, whose crown demanded an answer his heart had spent years avoiding. King Charles had always believed time might succeed where conversation had failed. He imagined another invitation, another private weekend, another carefully managed encounter that could bring his sons into the same room without anger. William's handwritten request destroyed that illusion. It did not ask the king to abandon Harry as a son. It asked him to accept that the younger prince could never again occupy the role he once held within the monarchy. Charles still held the authority of the sovereign, the reigning monarch with the final responsibility for the crown. Yet William controlled the future direction of the institution as heir, especially the household Harry would have to work beside if any official return were ever attempted. Senior advisors warned that restoring the younger royal without his brother's cooperation would create two competing centers of power, one shaped by the present reign and another preparing for the next. Charles read the note alone at his desk. He reached for a pen, stopped, and slowly set it down. For several seconds, the king said nothing. Then he whispered Harry's childhood nickname, allowing the father beneath the monarch to surface. The request before him sounded administrative, but its cost was painfully human. Signing it meant accepting that hope could survive privately while ending institutionally. Camilla urged him not to force William into an arrangement he believed threatened Catherine, their children, and the stability of the future court. The queen consort understood that the prince's cooperation could not be ordered without consequences. Her warning left Charles trapped between two duties: protecting the younger son he still loved, and preserving the confidence of the elder one who would inherit everything. William's proposal was precise. Harry would remain untouched as a family member, but every internal plan for a working return, shared household role, or future ceremonial restoration had to be removed from palace planning. A ceremonial restoration meant formally returning someone to official duties and public royal functions. The distinction was brutal but clear. The family door could remain open, while the institutional one would close. Charles then discovered that several courtiers had quietly maintained an inactive return framework, a private contingency file outlining how Harry might someday resume limited duties. William requested that the document be closed permanently. The public statement was not simply emotional, it was backed by structural action. The king finally signed a brief authorization stating that no official role could be offered without the heirs' agreement. His signature gave William the control needed to make the declaration final. Within hours, invitations were cancelled, seating plans revised, and the proposed Balmoral reunion withdrawn. The ink had barely dried before the consequences moved through the palace corridors, turning one painful sentence into a new reality no one could pretend was temporary. Harry had heard angry words before. He had endured headlines, palace briefings, family silences, and carefully phrased statements designed to reveal almost nothing. This was different. William's declaration came with immediate consequences. An invitation disappeared. A meeting was cancelled. A familiar name was removed from an internal schedule. For the first time since leaving royal life, Harry understood that the institution was no longer preparing for his eventual return. The palace withdrew his proposed invitation to the Balmoral family weekend almost immediately. Balmoral is the monarch's private Scottish estate, often used for quiet family gatherings away from London. Yet the weekend was no longer described as a reunion. It became a working family strategy retreat, involving Charles, William, Catherine, Anne, Edward, and Sophie. The change mattered because Harry had not simply been left off a guest list, he had been separated from the group responsible for shaping the monarchy's future. Another revision followed. An internal ceremonial plan removed the placeholder that had reserved Harry a possible position at future national events. He could still attend selected family occasions, but only as a non-working relative. The distinction stripped away the ambiguity he had lived with for years. He remained part of the family by blood, yet no place inside the royal structure was being held for him. Harry received the cancellation by email. He read it on his phone, placed the device on the kitchen counter, and gripped the edge with both hands. Anger rose first. Then he saw that Charles had approved the decision, and anger collapsed into stunned silence. His father had not merely failed to stop William, the king had given the declaration institutional force. Meghan told him the message confirmed what she had long feared. The palace wanted a relationship only if he accepted a diminished position. Harry answered that losing the role was not the deepest wound. William had made the loss permanent. His brother had closed the possibility that time, regret, or their father's hope might ever restore what had been abandoned. Harry considered releasing details of the Windsor confrontation. They even began organizing the sequence in his mind. Then William's accusation returned. Every private exchange eventually became public. Another disclosure would prove his brother's point. Charles called soon afterward. Harry let the phone ring until it stopped. A voice message followed. The king said, "You are still my son," but offered no promise of restored status. Harry listened twice. On the second hearing, he sat down and covered his face. He finally understood the separation between belonging to his father and belonging to the monarchy. Then he wrote William a private letter. It contained no conditions, no demands, and one question. For the first time, the noise fell away, leaving two brothers with nothing between them but a letter and the memory of who they had once been. The envelope carried no royal crest, no legal language, and no list of conditions. Harry had written William's name by hand. Inside was a single page, shorter than anyone expected. He did not ask for a title, a residence, security, or a place in a procession. Instead, he asked one question. "When you said I could never return, did you mean to the institution, or to you?" The distinction stopped William cold. A trusted private courier delivered the letter directly, avoiding palace channels and the officials who normally record sensitive royal correspondence. William waited until Catherine had left the room before opening it. He wanted no advisor interpreting the language, and no courtier turning one brother's pain into institutional strategy. For once, Harry's words reached him without passing through the machinery of the crown. Harry admitted that he had chosen to leave royal duty. He also acknowledged that demanding public restoration before accepting private reconciliation had made every conversation feel like a negotiation. The confession mattered because it removed the argument William had expected. His brother was not defending the proposal from the chapel. He was finally recognizing what those conditions had cost. William reached the final question and stopped. The prince remained motionless before walking to a cabinet and retrieving the childhood photograph he had turned face down days earlier. He placed it upright beside the letter. The gesture did not erase years of anger, but it exposed the truth beneath his declaration. The role had died, yet affection had not. Catherine returned and found him still seated. William told her he would not reverse the institutional decision. A working royal is a family member who officially represents the monarch through duties, events, and public service, and that position would remain closed to Harry. Yet the future king no longer wanted his statement understood as the permanent death of their personal bond. William wrote a brief reply in his own hand. "The roll is closed. The door to me is not." The sentence became the emotional turning point. It separated the monarchy's boundary from the brothers' private relationship without weakening either one. The prince offered a meeting at a neutral private residence with no aides, no formal agenda, and one condition that could not be negotiated. Nothing discussed would be repeated publicly by either side. Harry received the reply before dawn. He read it alone, exhaled slowly, and folded it into his pocket rather than showing it to anyone. That small act of privacy carried more meaning than any public statement could have done. Yet the world knew nothing of the letter or the reply. It heard only William's devastating declaration, and reaction was already spreading far beyond Britain. Behind closed doors, a fragile personal bridge had survived, but outside, the world believed William had exiled his brother forever. By sunrise, William's sentence was no longer confined to Windsor. It dominated broadcasts, phone screens, newspaper stands, and conversations far beyond palace gates. Some heard the voice of a future king protecting the crown. Others heard a brother publicly rejecting a brother. Yet beneath the arguments, one image captured the true weight of the moment. An empty space beside William, where Harry had once been expected to stand. Broadcasters described the announcement as the clearest definition yet of Harry's royal future. Commentators explained that private family contact might continue, but his former role as a working royal had been permanently closed. A working royal is a member of the family who officially represents the monarch through public duties, ceremonies, and service. That distinction mattered because William had not erased his brother's identity. He had ended the possibility of restoring his institutional power. Palace aides issued a brief clarification. They stated that the prince's words referred only to official duty and household status, not to Harry's place as Charles's son or his private connection to relatives. The message tried to draw a careful boundary, but the public heard something far more emotional. To millions watching, the monarchy had turned a family wound into history. The fictional London Chronicle captured that pain with brutal force. Its front page carried a black and white photograph of William and Harry walking beside each other as boys, beneath the headline, "The Brother Who Cannot Come Home." The image spread quickly because it contrasted childhood closeness with adult separation. It made the decision feel less like palace policy and more like a promise broken over time. A crowd gathered outside Windsor Castle as the debate intensified. One supporter placed 2 small bouquets beside the gate. A card on one read, "Duty." The other said, "Family." Television cameras recorded the gesture, and within hours, it became the symbol of a nation divided over which loyalty should have come first. Public opinion fractured sharply. William's supporters praised him for ending uncertainty and protecting Catherine and their children from further instability. His critics accused the future king of turning private pain into permanent exclusion. Both sides believed they were defending something sacred. Charles watched the coverage alone. When the newspaper image appeared on screen, the king switched off the television before the discussion ended. He could not bear seeing the complicated suffering of his sons reduced to opposing camps. William refused every request to soften or withdraw the statement. Yet he privately instructed aides never to call Harry banished. The boundary concerned royal authority, not family existence. The world had delivered its judgment, but the final meaning of William's words could only be decided by the 2 men who had lived through everything behind them. William's statement did not bring Harry back. It did not restore the partnership once celebrated as the monarchy's modern future, nor did it erase years of anger, disclosure, and disappointment. What it achieved was harsher and more honest. It ended the illusion that Harry could leave royal duty, challenge the institution from outside, and one day return to the same position as though nothing had changed. The old place was gone, because the old trust was gone. William's declaration became permanent palace policy. Harry would not return as a working royal, create a parallel royal office, reclaim his former household authority, or resume the ceremonial position he had left. A working royal is a family member who officially represents the monarch through public service and national duties. The decision ended years of uncertainty because birth alone could no longer guarantee influence without responsibility, confidentiality, and lasting commitment. Harry accepted the boundary in a private written reply delivered through a trusted courier. He did not publicly endorse his brother's language, but he confirmed that he would no longer attach demands for restoration to family reconciliation. The younger prince understood that every attempt to recover his former place had turned personal contact into another negotiation. For the first time, he separated the life he had lost from the family he still hoped to know. Charles arranged a private meeting with Harry as his son, not as the sovereign representing the crown. No photographers waited. No officials prepared a statement. No ceremonial plan rested on the table. The king welcomed him without promising a title, a duty, or a future return. That distinction hurt, but it also removed the pressure that had poisoned every previous conversation. William joined them later. The brothers did not embrace. They stood in silence until Harry finally said, "I understand what I lost." The prince answered, "Then we can stop fighting over what no longer exists." Those words delivered the final truth. William had never declared that his brother had ceased to be family. He had declared that love could no longer erase consequences or force the monarchy to rebuild a role that had been willingly abandoned. The future king accepted that protecting the institution might require decisions that wounded him personally. Harry accepted that leaving had consequences no public demand could reverse. Charles accepted that fatherhood and kingship could not always give the same answer. The royal partnership was finished. The uniform, influence, and shared path would not return. Yet the man behind them had not been erased. Brotherhood survived smaller, quieter, and finally separated from the crown. The palace door to Harry's former life closed for good, but beyond the titles and broken expectations, two brothers were finally left to decide whether family could exist without the throne between them. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.